You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and I am joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
I'm good. You guys can't tell because I have a light on me, but in this room that I'm in, it's our spare bedroom. There's a fan, and it's got 4 lights in different directions going. We've recently had some other lights in the house burn out. So like any good former bachelor, you move the lights from the room that you don't need them in to the area that you need them, right? We can all relate, right? We can all relate. But now there is one working light in this fan, in this light. There's one light, and it's just the one that's shining on me. I did it on purpose. I made sure that it was the one that was shining this direction so I could still do this. But it feels a little bit like I'm in an interrogation room because there's just one solo light above me. The rest of the room is covered in half darkness. But I am happy to report we did go get new lights after I screwed it up the last time and got the wrong color lights. But now, after we're done here, there will be full lights again in this room. So that's what's going on in my life.
You know, Alex, my wife still does that. And then
as well you should, to be honest.
The house, I'm going, What the hell?
You just flip on a
God
switch
bless
and you
her.
go, oh, we need a light there. What room don't we need lights in? Let's go get from there.
Absolutely. Well, I had a very interesting day for a number of different reasons, and none of which revolved around fantasy football, except for I feel pretty good today. I traded a rookie 108 pick for Austin Eckler. I've done some deep diving on Austin Eckler here in the past few days, and I'm liking him more and more and more. So I think I came out ahead on that deal. I'm okay with that one. Outside of that, I'm glad it's Tuesday night. I'm glad to be talking football. I'm glad to be hanging out with y'all, like my peeps of like mind and similar interests. Like, this is the highlight of my week, guys. So don't disappoint me.
All right, we'll try our best not to. Guys, thanks for tuning in, everybody. If you haven't done so already, do us a favor, hit the follow button, hit the subscribe button on the Twitter, Twitch, or YouTube, wherever you're watching this right now. Thanks for tuning in. But we are joined by a very special guest tonight. We've got Billy Whitt from the Fantasy First Rounders Live coming to us. Billy, how you doing?
Doing well, guys. How are you?
Cannot
Awesome.
complain.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Dude, we will have you anytime. We love you guys. You know that.
You guys are awesome.
Yeah, man.
You were so fun on the draft special that we did. If you haven't gone and seen that, go and take a peek at that. We were reacting real time to the draft picks. That was a lot of fun. We had some fun with that.
I'm glad we did that. I'm glad we put that together.
And for those of you who don't know, while our friend, our fraternity brother, Christopher Pinto, might be the mouthpiece of the Fantasy First Rounders,
That's
Billy here
lightly.
is the brains and the guy that if you want shit done, Billy's the guy who gets shit done. Like he implements all processes and brings it all together. So as much as we love you guys, we know you are the guy to go to if we need to get things done, Billy. And for that, we appreciate you so much more.
I appreciate the kind words, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun being able to hang out with you guys, and definitely appreciated all the help that you brought to the table on getting that thing ready to go. And there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff that Billy was definitely involved with and helping bring to life. So cannot be overstated how valuable your input was on bringing that draft special to life, which was a ton of fun. Go check it out. It's on the YouTube channel. But Billy, we've had you on when we did the draft thing. But what are you guys working on right now over there at the Fantasy First Rounders Live?
So right now, a lot of our efforts are going into just our weekly shows, starting to rank some players, talking about redraft as you guys are as well. Then, of course, our mega league, the St. Jude Bowl, our second year putting that event on. So we're taking registrations, working out payments. We're going to be assigning divisions here soon. as things heat up here a little bit. That's the exciting part, figuring out who you might be in a league with. So that's kind of where we're at. We're going to be doing some other formats as well. Ryan's kind of masterminding a lot of that up, but a big event. Come check us out, and then, hey, play fantasy football with us.
Absolutely. And we have signed up for the
thank you
for the St. Jude's Bowl. Enjoyed playing in that last year. Looking forward to it again this year. Make sure that you sign up there and see if you can come beat the boys and see what you can do.
Yeah, $1,200 grand prize that we gave away last year. We donated a similar amount of money to St. Jude's. Looking to expand on that, so bigger prize money, bigger donation, win-win situation for sure. So. Hey, $1,200 pot. That's major bragging rights, winning something like that.
Hey, can you let the people know how do you sign up for that? How do you get involved in that?
So we have a link that just has a registration. Once you register on that link, we can get it posted here and send it over to you guys there. And but fantasy first rounders, check out our Twitter. We have it pinned and tweeted out all over the place. So register there. Get your sleeper ID to us, your Twitter if you have it. And we'll hit you back with directions to get paid and get solidified in your slot in the main event.
Absolutely, guys. Not only is it an awesome league, and you guys do a fantastic job running it, but like Derek said, it's for such a great cause. Excuse me as I trip over myself this evening. But with the proceeds, or a portion of the proceeds, right, getting split, half go to the winner for bragging rights, but the half that go to St. Jude's and what they're able to do for the struggling youth in America who are fighting diseases that are unspeakable, right? No child should have to deal with the stuff that these poor kids are, and it's such a great cause. So kudos to you guys. Oh my goodness, guys! I promise I haven't been drinking yet. And for anybody who is interested, please sign up. Come chat at us. In the league, come play against us, battle for the $1,200, and most importantly, come give back to the kids because they are the future of our world. I'm gonna change over here a little bit for fantasy football purposes, but we'll get into our team of the week here in a little bit, Billy. But as we've gone through kind of this dynasty rookie draft season, if you will,
sure. Yeah.
Who's a guy that you think is going way too early? And then on the flip side, who's a guy that you think keeps falling down boards that's going way too late?
Well, I guess one guy I'm really digging. A lot of my picks were later because either I traded back earlier or just placed higher last season. But I like Trey Sermon a lot. I've been taking him kind of at the end of the first round. I just like that opportunity in San Francisco. At first, maybe not a year one guy, but just Shanahan taking him in the third round, I feel like is a pretty serious investment for a guy like Shanahan who's kind of played musical chairs at that running back position. So I think that's kind of a good outlook for his future there in San Fran as kind of the Jeff Wilson Jr. injury news came in. And Mostert, is kind of a journeyman guy and not somebody they've always just leaned on as a guarantee. So I feel like Sermon has a real opportunity to take that job. And, early in drafts, I was getting him a lot later than I have been lately. He's been that next running back kind of taken after Javonte Williams or ETN go, depending on, who's in your league. But that's a guy that I'm really high on. That he did start to climb, so I can't say he's going too early necessarily, but he is starting to get up there where maybe he's going a little bit early. The hype might be kind of starting to roll downhill pretty good on him, even though I do like the situation a lot. And some of these receivers, like we talked about Rashad Bateman, I feel like guys we were really high on him. A lot of people are underwhelmed about the Baltimore landing spot, and I don't think it's necessarily going to be an issue. I think he would bring a different element as that possession receiver type guy to Baltimore. So I think he's going to be extreme value where you're getting him kind of mid-late second round sometimes in some of these drafts as things start to shake out.
I think that's a good counterpoint, right? Because I know I've been on the bandwagon of I dislike that landing spot so much that
yes.
I'm not going to say that I've forgotten about Bateman, but every time I look at him, I go, damn it, I like the player a lot. I like his skill set, but man, oh man, do I not trust Lamar Jackson to be able to do anything with it. So it is, I appreciate that. I think I'm probably leaning on him a little bit more, maybe like a best ball, see him in a game or two that he pops. But, if you're saying that he's going to be the possession guy, then, I'll buy into that. Maybe take a stab at him here or there.
Yeah, Billy, you're making me feel really good there, having just traded up for him in a dynasty draft going on there, where I traded up into the 208 and was able to get him there, just some good value. But he's a guy that I have also passed on him quite a bit there. When you're looking at taking him a late first or early second, like that's just too rich for me. But when he starts falling past that midpoint in the second, I think there's a lot of value there. So I think you're onto something.
Yeah, it's just hard to pass up on a guy that you know is a good football player. Say Hollywood Brown misses some time with a hamstring, he's going to be the big dog there. He might break out a little sooner than later if that type of situation happens.
Yeah, you very well could be onto something there. But Billy, before we get moving on and talking about some NFL news, if you could let the listeners know where they can connect with you online and through the socials, how can they reach out and talk to you?
Yeah, just find me on Twitter at bwit24. I'm available there all the time. Talk football, at me, DM me, whatever. You got some leagues that you got a spot available, hit me up. I'm joining about everything I can right now, trying to get out there and meet more people and see what I can't win.
Absolutely. Billy just jumped into a vampire league that we just got rolling there. So that'll be a lot of fun, and we'll bring you all some updates on that. We've also got a dynasty league that he's in. So I've been liking your draft strategies. It's been a lot of fun drafting with you and seeing how you roll through some of those things.
Yeah, I've been cussing you guys for weeks.
I'm sure. But let's go ahead and head on over, and we'll talk about some NFL news. And again, not a lot of crazy things happening. Right now it's 100 days until NFL kicks off. So we're T-minus 100 days and counting. June 1st is today. So that means that things should be happening here in the next couple of days when we start talking salary cap. And I know that Alex and Kevin and myself are looking forward to something that we hope and we have been hinting at over the last few episodes there. Todd Gurley this past week worked out for the Lions. Corey Davis had a minor shoulder strain in some OTAs. Urban Meyer came out saying that he's ready to use Tim Tebow as Taysom Hill 2.0 down there in Jacksonville. And Burrow was spotted throwing today, had some long passes he was completing to T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd there. And, the drama still continues with both Julio Jones and some trade rumors happening there. And the drama still continues over there in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. But guys, what are your thoughts on the news?
There's a whole lot of smoke screens going on right now,
gosh.
guys.
There's so many.
There's so many smoke screens. And I think we talked about this a bit last week too. Urban ready to use Tebow as Taysom. Well, no shit, Sherlock. You signed him as a tight end. Yes, he can throw the ball a little bit, but the fact that he's played some NFL quarterback, you're going to have special packages, gadget plays, whatever, where teams are going to have to be ready for Tim Tebow if he makes the roster to throw the ball. So it's going to be one of those weird sets, right? Where you're going to have ETN out wide, Tim Tebow under shotgun, and then you're going to have Trevor Lawrence as like the wing back or something. I mean, Urban Meyer is going to come up with some crazy stuff, but it's not going to be part of their their base package here. So of course it is. My boy Todd Gurley. I love Todd Gurley. I hate that he's always injured and that he has these knees. I hope he's able to find a team and at least continue his NFL career. It sucks that it was cut short due to some bad knees and some arthritis, but I would love to see him pair up with DeAndre Swift again in Detroit just for nostalgia's sake. I think that'd be pretty cool. So the best of luck to him, and hopefully it works out.
Yeah, so obviously the smoke screens that are coming out of Jacksonville. I mean, Urban Meyer has been head coach down there for not even 6 months yet, and we are seeing just a masterclass in toying with the media being done by Urban Meyer. He's got ETN working as a wide receiver. Everybody latched onto that. He signs Tim Tebow. He says, "Oh, I'm going to Taysom Hill, Tim Tebow." He is just putting on a masterclass. And truth be told, he's getting people talking about him. He was on AEW the other night. I saw his office getting destroyed in a fake wrestling thing. So he is just doing everything he can to get relevancy again in Jacksonville, right? Like that's what he's doing. He's trying to get Jacksonville to be relevant again. And sometimes you got to take a different path to go about doing that, especially when you have nothing to show for it on the field because there's no games yet. So that is definitely the interesting one. Guys, I am starting to cool a little bit on the Rodgers to Denver, and maybe it's just a self-defense mechanism because I don't want to get my hopes up and then for it to not happen. But I'm starting to cool a little bit on that. I'm not so certain as I was on draft night that it was going to happen. I am not so certain that it's going to happen now. I think the asking price is going to be too much, even though I don't think that there is too much when it comes to giving up whatever you need to do to get Aaron Rodgers. But I do think that with the position of power that Green Bay is in, that I'm more in the camp of either Rodgers plays in Green Bay or doesn't play at all. That's the camp that I'm in. I don't see him working. I don't see a deal getting worked out where he's playing for a different team next year. So hopefully I'm wrong. But again, I'm doing the defense mechanism of keeping my expectations low. That way it doesn't take much to exceed them.
Is that just so you don't have to have an epic breakup letter here in July with the team already?
The pen has already been dipped in the ink. We are grabbing the parchment because if we just run out Drew Lock and or Teddy Bridgewater, oh boy.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Denver would be the only real landing spot for him still, just with what it's going to require to acquire Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, it does seem to be like things are kind of calming down. Maybe it's kind of an odd situation where he doesn't show up for OTAs. Neither do any of the wide receivers. You know, it's kind of a stand against the organization. It just kind of feels like things might just end up working out just fine, just because of the situation. Kind of always has. They've been at strife for a while. Aaron Rodgers with the Packers. But I'm with you, Kevin, on Gurley. I love that guy. I'm really upset. His career really got cut short and could have been, one of the greats to do it, especially from a fantasy football perspective. I would like to see him end up in Detroit, but it does make me a little upset with my DeAndre Swift shares because the Jamal Williams addition kind of makes you feel like he's already got a capped receiving, portion of the game, because Jamal Williams is going to play that pass catch and back role to some point. I mean, they brought him in for a reason, I guess. And, Gurley's not going to do that, but is he going to take goal line, snipe a touchdown or three? That's the difference in a guy that could be, top 15 to, maybe scoshing into the top 25. So that is a bit concerning. Not that he'll get a ton of work, I don't imagine, but might just be the right work to put a thorn in Swift's side. It's kind of, I don't know, unfortunate, but I would like to see him catch on somewhere, play a few years next to somebody that can help him stay healthy, play a year, maybe make a playoff run. I could see him having a big role in a big game sometime. He is Todd Gurley, you know what I mean? So that's interesting. But the Urban Meyer, Tim Tebow thing, I see him throwing 3 jump passes to Trevor Lawrence throughout the season, maybe in that Taysom Hill role. But I don't know. Tebow seems like the distraction to keep, like to your point, Alex, the media puppet. You know what we're not talking about? The number 1 overall draft pick, Trevor Lawrence. So he's doing a good job letting that kid kind of sit down there in peace right now with all the pressure on him. Doesn't seem like we're even realizing that they do have that number 1 quarterback, and I think that is a masterclass, as you said, Alex, and the media just keeping them over here while we let this kid do his thing. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, guys, any other thoughts on the news? Okay. Let's go ahead and move on over to some keeper strategy. And so kind of some, peel back the curtain a little bit and, some insight as to where this kind of came from. We played in a pirate type of league last year.
Well, you guys did.
that allowed for the winning team to pirate a player off of another team. And, you ended up with the teams competing for championships and making deep playoff runs with some very stacked teams. And so I sent a picture of the roster over to Alex and Kevin this weekend and asked, who are you keeping out of this deal? You can only keep 2 players. Who are you keeping? And Alex immediately, he said, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray. And I go, well, but CMC's on this roster, and while it's super flex and that kind of stuff, which leads us into the kind of give you that backdrop to lead us into this, this question of, keeper strategy. How do you look and work, and how do you ultimately plan for that coming through? How do you determine who you're keeping in the league? Does the position matter? Does ADP matter for you? Does a positional difference matter to you? Or how does a draft penalty on the keeper change all of that for you? And I'm just curious to get y'all's thoughts. What do you guys think on how to go about managing a keeper league?
So since I was the one who offered up not only this conversation point, but my instant opinion when you sent the text the first time. I mean, you first off, the roster that you sent us is as if you were playing in a league by yourself. I mean, that's how loaded this roster was, which essentially, because of the rules of this league, you were able to essentially play in a league by yourself because you kept winning and you kept poaching the best player from the team that you just beat. So you essentially did get a super team. So to preface this whole thing with this specific question that was posed, you had an embarrassment of riches. And that's not often the case for people when they are making their keeper strategy. But I fired off right away and said, why is this even a question? It's a super flex league. You have Kyler Murray and Josh Allen as quarterbacks. Why wouldn't you keep the guys that will get you the most points? Because in my mind, and the way that I approach fantasy football is I want the guys that are going to score me the most points, right? That's what fantasy football is. There's no defense. So you want the guys that are going to give you the most points. And on that roster, Kyler and Josh Allen were going to be the guys that would get you the most points. That was the solid. We knew what to expect out of them. Now, injuries and everything happen. That's part of fantasy football as it is. But on paper, those 2 were going to be the most point getters. So I said, keep those guys. That's the way. And Derek came back with the great question of why, Am I playing for points or am I playing for positional value? Because you have guys on there. You have CMC, who is going to be, on paper at least, and if he gets back to form, he is head and shoulders above every other running back in the league. You have a Travis Kelce on that roster, who is head and shoulders above every other tight end in the league. Maybe not quite so much if Kittle's healthy for an entire season, but still. It's a tight end that's going to score more points than anybody else, given the recent past in that position group. But it's still not going to be more points than what a Kyler or a Josh Allen is going to get you, because it is a super flex league, and quarterbacks are always so valuable in super flex leagues. So I was very quick when it comes to in this league, when it comes to positional value versus points. I'm always going to chase points. That's how I approach fantasy football. I'm chasing points because I want the most points. And it may not be on a week by week basis, but over the course of a season, the most points are generally going to lead to success. So that's where I'm at with it. Now, when it comes to draft penalties, those are definitely conversations that you're going to need to have with yourself, bounce off ideas with other people, because if you're talking about a guy who is a guaranteed no doubter first rounder, and your draft penalty is, the first round, well, then that's a 1-for-1. But if you're talking about a guy who maybe you drafted late and then the draft penalty is where you got him, for instance, if we would have been playing in our home league and we would have had draft penalties, I would have had Carson Wentz his rookie year, and I got him in he was the very last pick of the draft, or my very last pick of the draft. So that draft penalty wouldn't have hurt at all. If that was what the draft penalty was you lose the pick that the round pick that you took the guy with. So those are definitely things that you'll have to weigh and consider. But for me personally, If it's points versus positional value, and for this Superflex league, it was points, I'm going to go points.
Yeah, I'm been pondering this since we talked about it pre-show here, and kind of went back and just looked at like what Christian McCaffrey's numbers really were like. You know, we're a couple years out now after missing him for most of last year, so kind of some of that's worn off a little bit, that hype. But in 2019, when he was the RB1, he was like 480 fantasy points, a little over 480 fantasy points, which would have been RB1 by 160 fantasy points last season, over 10 points per game over Alvin Kamara season long, which is crazy numbers. Josh Allen, to put that in perspective, was QB1 last year and had just over 500 points. You're talking about within 20 points of the number one quarterback. So really that positional value sets CMC apart. So for me, I'd be flipping the coin between Josh Allen and Kyler Murray, as they're both right up there, and especially dynasty quarterback. Similar upside, similar guys. It's really preference, splitting some hairs. Loaded talent around them, the works. Not a lot of negatives about those guys. So flipping a coin between them, maybe you get lucky and one lands back in the draft. But for me, CMC with one of those quarterbacks puts you in a boat where no one can match your running back production, and you can supplement a lesser quarterback with Josh Allen later, and I think be in a really, really good spot and always have a week-to-week advantage at that RB1 position.
I tend to lean with the direction that Billy's looking at too. I just, in a keeper league, I'm points. Obviously, you need points to win, but I do like that positional difference. And having Christian McCaffrey on your team gives you that difference from the rest of the position, because while we all have an idea of what, the top 10 for running backs is going to be, as we saw last year, it doesn't always shake out like that. And in a season where now we have an extra game, there's guys doing some extra things, we're going to more running back by committee type looks by these NFL teams, at least to some extent. Christian McCaffrey still owns that backfield really all to himself. Yes, they drafted Chuba Hubbard, but there's nothing saying that he's going to be anything more, at least this first season, than, come in for 10 snaps a game as a guy just to spell McCaffrey and get him that extra bit of rest. So I like the McCaffrey pick. And really for the second keeper, I think a lot of that's the way this team is constructed, especially because you're able to poach so many guys. It's how you want to set it up, Derek, honestly, or anybody would want to set it up in this situation. I don't fault anybody for wanting to go one of the two quarterbacks. I don't fault anybody for wanting to go Travis Kelce, because I think in this league specifically, there's a tight end premium attached to it, if I remember correctly. So having that tight end premium attached to it does elevate Travis Kelce, because he's guaranteed to have 1,000 yards and 6 or 7 touchdowns. I mean, even without the tight end premium last year, he finished as essentially wide receiver number 4. That was Travis Kelce. And so to get that production out of your tight end sets you above in that mark. So I don't see anything wrong in that. And then you still have a Tyreek Hill type to be able to trot out there if you wanted a number 1 receiver. I wouldn't fault anybody for that. I might scratch my head a little bit. I don't know if that'd be my first go-to, but if you wanted to take one of the two quarterbacks, or Kelce or Tyreek, I don't know that or Jonathan Taylor, he's also on this roster, right? So if you wanted 2 top 5 running backs to start and then just worry about your quarterbacks and start picking quarterbacks up throughout the season, I'm fine with that one too, because no one will have a better backfield than a team that starts the season with CMC and Jonathan Taylor. And that positional group will set you so far above everybody else, you can deal with early season deficiencies in other areas. And then as you're able to pick players off due to winning, right, then you can just, I need another receiver, or I need this tight end or whatever, because with only being able to save 2 every single week, there's a lot of guys who are out there that are going to be changing rosters. So there's a lot of different ways you could go, but CMC is my base 1.
Okay. So, and that's one of those too, that this roster, right? A lot of times when you're looking at keepers and that kind of stuff, you really got maybe 3 or 4 guys tops that you're really going to be looking at. And then some other things factor into it. I like this team for this discussion because of the fact that you have, an elite tier player at every position, and you get a positional difference maker across the board, and only being able to keep 2 of them kind of highlights the strategy in play here, instead of more so, I'm taking this guy because of the fact that he's going to be better or so on and so forth. In this one, you're really going to be giving up an elite tier position difference maker at every level, no matter which way you go. So there's not a singular route to go there. And so that's one of those I find you tend to get some of the best discussion and some of the best questions and thought processes going on things that aren't just, kind of a gimme kind of answer or a slam dunk answer. But looking at all of that, right? Like when there's not a draft penalty for it, Polar Knights, love it. We've got the evolution of beards. So this is awesome. Really like that comment. That's a fun one right there.
For what it's worth, this was supposed to go away today, but I got busy. So
well, I'm glad you didn't,
away,
because now it highlights this. So thank you, Polar Knights. That's a fun question there, fun comment there. But yeah, when you start looking at that, right? The other thing that comes into play is how much does somebody's ADP kind of come into the conversation there as well. So, for instance, in a league where you don't have a draft penalty in account there, how much is what somebody's ADP come into the decision making of who you're going to keep?
I think it has to play some, right? Because there's guys where you can gamble more on, right? Like you have Diggs, Robinson, and Tyreek, where you're starting wide receivers to end the season, right? Like, so you can sit back and go, okay, I can say that if I really want to go wide receiver in my first 2 rounds of picks, since there's no penalty, you'll end up with 1 or 2 of those 3 guys, depending on what you want to do. Same thing with the quarterback, right? Like, there's a run of quarterbacks that might go, but for your first 2, if you're already set at running back and then you're looking at quarterback, you can still get a top 10 quarterback in all likelihood there at the back end of the first round, and then follow that up with a receiver. Maybe it is a Travis Kelce that you can turn around and pick back up there for a 3rd technical round evaluation and still set yourself apart. So for me, I think ADP does have something to do with it, because CMC won't be there. Kyler Murray won't be there in a super flex. Josh Allen probably won't be there in a super flex. But after that, Kelce might be there, depending on what guys want to do. That's possible if they want to try and get quarterback early, as most super flex leagues do, right? Quarterback. So Kelce might fall to you back there. Tyreek Hill might fall to you back there. So there's guys that you don't necessarily have to keep because you know where you're drafting, and you can take an educated gamble. It's not a certainty, but an educated gamble that if I really like this guy, there's a much better chance that he will fall to me where I'm drafting than Christian McCaffrey, who will go in the top 4 no matter your draft format.
I think another thing, too, is kind of knowing your league and what guys are being thrown back in the pool. So you can kind of tell, like, if there's a lot of running backs available, you keep a couple running backs, and now all of a sudden you're able to kind of take those receivers that are going to end up lasting there and able to build that roster kind of a round ahead, knowing what you want to do. And as everybody's starting to scoop up receivers, that's when you go ahead and start sniping the running backs that are getting left behind as guys try to put their roster together. So I think that's a big advantage. If you know what guys like to do, how they like to build their rosters, guys you play, home leagues, when you know at the 6th pick what this guy does every single year, it kind of helps you make that decision who you might be willing to throw back and not. And to Kevin's point, then you can kind of make an educated guess on what's going to land you at the end of that first round. And you might end up getting, like you said, a Kelsey or Tyreek Hill right back. Allen Robinson, he might be there in the second round for you even with if someone's down on the quarterback situation there. So really good chance you end up with most of this team back without really pushing too hard to draft if you know your draft room.
Absolutely. So, we hinted at it a little bit, and not to really beleaguer the point here, but I do want to kind of get some thoughts on. So, say when the draft penalty comes into play there, and for everybody just to kind of set the terms on draft penalty, right? In this conversation, it'll be a draft penalty would give you that person back on your roster at the draft pick you drafted him at the previous year. So, for instance, if you took Jonathan Taylor in a redraft last year in the 4th round, right? You would get him in the 4th round type of thing. And that's how we'll kind of set the stage for this conversation. But that's where I'm asking the question is, how does that draft penalty really change where you look at for keepers? Or is it one that you're going with best players knowing that might be a 1st round type of guy, or is it one that you're going to build the value further on and then try and make that up with what's left out there?
For me, that's roster dependent and again, situational to each individual team. Now, if we take this team that you've kind of shown us in this Pirate League that you did last year, yeah, because you probably got Diggs in the 7th, maybe.
Yeah, it was
6th
late
last year, but you got Diggs pretty late. Well, he's shown with Allen, heck, he's a contending top 5 receiver. So there's a lot of value there in the 7th round. So that's not a bad deal to get a top 5 player in any position in the 7th round. So that's a spot where then, yeah, that makes sense. You just saved your 7th round pick. And so, yeah, you might take McCaffrey because he's your 1st round pick. You have Diggs locked up. He's your 7th round pick. And then you can build the team within and really see where it's going to go, because a lot of guys won't, maybe they didn't have the value, or they don't care about the value as much. They know that they want, player A and B, and they don't care if that's their 2nd and 3rd or 1st and 2nd or however that breakdown is for them. They like this guy. They think he's going to produce, and they don't weigh the value side of things. So that's absolutely a way to gain a strategic advantage, is carry Diggs over if you got him in the 7th. Hell, you're not picking up anything else remotely close to that production level in the 7th round by the time you get down there anyway. So you've essentially won that round of the draft. If you feel like Christian McCaffrey is the best overall player, then you won the 1st round. So that's how you kind of set yourselves apart when you're looking at round penalties for these draft picks. If I keep this guy here, do I win that round no matter who else is taken there?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. And I think what this really boils down to is doing your homework beforehand. And really, I mean, honestly, if we're talking about it, it's Billy's point of know your draft room, know the guys, know the teams that are in the league, know what they are looking at, what they might value over other things. I mean, here's a great example. In our home league, I was going to get Carson Wentz at all costs. I drafted Carson Wentz his rookie year, and in our home league up until this year, there was no draft penalty for that. But that would have been the draft penalty for that would have been the last pick, the last round pick, right? As I said, but I was going to hang on to Carson Wentz for as long as I possibly could, for no matter what. So that was just something. He was my guy, right? That's my guy, and we all have it. We all have our guy, right? And we're going to do whatever we can. We might reach a little bit. We might, hang on to somebody that we probably shouldn't, because he's our guy. But I think what it comes down to it is everybody else in the league kind of knew that, right? So they knew, like, oh, I might be able to snipe Carson Wentz off early, and then I might be able to fleece Alex for a trade later on. Like that might be the case. And I made it known. It was my own doing. I made it known that Carson Wentz was going to be my guy. But really know the room that you're in. Take a look at what the positional value is. And to Kevin's point, you're not going to make sure that you win the round, right? Like make sure that you win the round of the draft. And if you get a Stephon Diggs in the 7th round, like that's not going to happen this year. Stephon Diggs is not going to fall to the 7th round in any draft this year. So if you have him as a 7th round or even a 4th or 5th round, really, that's not gonna. You're not gonna get him at that value. And I always go back and think about guys like, those free agents that you picked up, right? That turned into dudes. Classic example last year, James Robinson, right? Nobody drafted James Robinson, and nobody even knew who he was until after week 1, unless you listen to this show. And so nobody knew about James Robinson. That's a freebie. That's a free agent. That's not going to cost you a draft pick anywhere. Now that's not going to work this year because obviously it's a new regime down there and they've got new talent down there. James Robinson, it doesn't look like he's going to have the same role that he had last year. But those are also things that you'll have to consider is, free agents that turned into, RB1 or wide receiver 1 or whatever, these dudes that exploded onto the scene last year. Another classic case from a few years back, Adam Thielen. People weren't taking Adam Thielen, and then he explodes onto the scene and is a 1,000-yard receiver, leads the league in touchdowns, whatever it was. But that's a freebie, right? And that's a wide receiver 1. And most people got him as a free agent in the first couple weeks of the draft or of the season, excuse me. So those are always, bonus players that, hey, it's not going to cost me a draft pick. I've already got a guy that's a top player, top positional player. Those are things that you'll have to consider as well.
Yeah, I agree on the same point. The first thing I want to do is look at my roster and see, is there any guys that stand out as way bigger value than where you got them? Like if you got Stephon Diggs in the 6th or 7th round last year, that stands out. That's a guy that's going to go late 1st, early 2nd round. Wide receiver 3 last year, the Josh Allen Buffalo Bills hype going on. That's one of those ones where, okay, so again, you did your homework, like Alex said. That's going to pay off for you. Now you get to keep Stephon Diggs forever as a 6th round pick because, you did your homework and knew that the value was there. And also like those undrafted guys you get, that's not even going to cost you a draft pick, to Alex's point. That's exactly why you want to work the waiver wire, especially in some of these leagues. Don't sit back and camp on some of these guys that you were high on. Do your research, look at the numbers, and see some of these guys' opportunities are better than players that might be better than them. This is fantasy football. You got to look at the numbers. Stats win chips. Big thing we preach on the fantasy first rounders. And guys like James Robinson are why stats win chips. There's no reason why James Robinson should have been a better running back than Leonard Fournette. But hey, look how it worked out. Leonard Fournette ends up in Tampa Bay. James Robinson, a top 10 back. And people are still high on him with Travis Etienne in that backfield. So for me, the first thing I'm doing is trying to see if there's anybody that just stands out as like, whoa, takes me back to when Kareem Hunt coming out. Spencer Ware got hurt while I was at the draft table. I got the notification, and I'm like, I'll go ahead this 12th round pick and take this kid Kareem Hunt that I know nothing about. Had that been a keeper league, people would still be pissed at me because I'd still have Kareem Hunt at a 12th round draft pick cost. So, look at that value because everybody has to throw guys back. Everybody's looking at value. If you don't lose your first round pick, you still may end up with a Dalvin Cook or Christian McCaffrey because somebody else may have a Stephon Diggs type in the 6th round that's a better value for them. So don't be afraid to keep guys with lesser values. Throw some big dogs back in the pond and see how things shake out for you next year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like the takes and like the discussion there. I think everybody hit on that very, very well. Unless anybody has some other burning thoughts on some keeper strategy, let's go ahead and move on over to the Indianapolis Colts.
I will say it is a good idea to keep Alvin Kamara. That is a good idea, and to not let him off of your roster. I know a guy who made that decision, and it did not work out very well for him in the short term. But he did win the fantasy football championship in that league last year. So, I mean, things happen.
Yeah, it took a full 2 seasons. By the way, that guy that Alex is talking about, he's on the YouTube channel. One of the very first videos that ever
Forgot
went
about
onto
that.
the YouTube channel. Go back there, watch it while you're there. Click the subscribe button. Absolutely fantastic interview with that guy that Alex knows. But let's go ahead and talk about some Indianapolis Colts, and we'll start where we always do. That's in the running back room. Jonathan Taylor finished as running back 6 on the year, 232 rush attempts, 1,169 yards, 11 touchdowns, 36 receptions on 40 targets for 299 and 1 through the air. Guys, your thoughts on Jonathan Taylor?
Really high on Jonathan Taylor coming in this year. He's my RB4 for redraft purposes, and a little bit higher in Dynasty. I just really like the talent, really like the position behind that O-line. So we really didn't get to see him cut loose until week 11 against Green Bay. 22 carries for 90 yards, 4 receptions on 4 targets. A nice 15-point fantasy day. Missed the next game, and then the remainder of the season, he just went on a tear. RB1, scored 130 fantasy points, 26 fantasy points per game, 650 yards on 97 carries, averaging 6.7 yards per carry, second only to Derrick Henry down the stretch in rushing yards, who just always goes on a tear in late December. So I like what I see. Like you said, RB6, and really didn't get cut loose until like the last, the latter mid back half of the season. So gotta like that upside. I'm not real concerned about anybody cutting into the workload. He showed he can catch balls. He is the clear-cut 1A RB1 in Indianapolis, and as a dynasty back, it doesn't get any sweeter than a guy of this caliber.
I agree with that completely. I love me some Jonathan Taylor as well. I think that another year of growth with Pittman, T.Y. Hilton coming back, Fisher coming over as a free agent to help solidify that offensive line yet again, and Carson Wentz being under center and the ability to use the deep ball that they didn't have last year. All these things help Jonathan Taylor. I would agree. He's in the top 5. Now, I think 4 is probably about right. I could see him as high as 2. I could see him as low as, 6 if something just doesn't quite go right. But that Indianapolis defense is for real. I like this Indy team as a whole a lot. I think that they should be competing for an AFC championship spot. I think them, Buffalo, and Kansas City are the clear top 3 in the AFC, and it's just going to be probably who has home field advantage. Like, can Indianapolis come back and redeem their playoff demon and beat Buffalo where they lost to them last year? Or is Kansas City going to keep running it? So there's a lot of things that Taylor showed he does very well. He runs behind his pads very well. He did this at Wisconsin. He can receive the ball. He worked on this a lot at Wisconsin, getting ready for the NFL, and it showed last year that he is able to catch balls out of the backfield. He is elusive. He is not a burner per se, but he does have that next gear that if he gets into the secondary, he is a problem to try and bring down. So all these things, on top of the fact that Indianapolis is good enough, they're going to be leading a lot in the fourth quarter, guys. And the best way to maintain a lead in the fourth quarter is you turn around and it's hand off, student body left, student body right, student body up the middle, whatever the hell you want to call it, but it's all volume for Jonathan Taylor. What this means is fantasy production, and that is why, at least for me and Billy, we'll see what Alex has to say. He's a clear top 5 fantasy back this season.
So I'm still bitter against Jonathan Taylor because I thought I was being sneaky and I picked up a ton of shares of Marlon Mack, and that did not work out. So I'm very bitter against Jonathan Taylor. And the reason for that bitterness is because that dude exploded onto the scene, and he is definitely, yeah.
Taylor didn't
top
make
5
Mack's Achilles blow up, though.
Well, yes, that also hurt. That also was not ideal. But there were two guys on this Indy team that I was super high on, and it didn't work out at all because of injuries. And then, I mean, really, hey, if Marlon Mack comes back and there isn't a Jonathan Taylor, then you'd have to think that Marlon Mack would have been the dude, because that was an offense that was going to be geared for running the football, right? It was Phillip Rivers, who is a gunslinger, but he relies on the run game. He's smart enough to check into plays to get running plays when the passing play isn't going to work out. He was smart enough to do that. I also had Marlon Mack when they didn't have a quarterback, and that it just didn't work out for me. But Jonathan Taylor, top 5 back, and I'm right there with you. I think that with everything else that they've done this year, another year on Frank Reich. I think Frank Reich is one of the best offensive minds in the game, and maybe one of the most underrated, which is crazy to say. But he's in Indianapolis. He was just the OC in Philly, but really, I mean, I think we're seeing how important he was to that Super Bowl run, because after he left, Philly went downhill. Carson Wentz wasn't the same player. So I'm excited to see Carson reunite with him, but more than that, they showed that year that they did make the Super Bowl run in Philly. They showed the importance of the run game, and they brought in, good power running backs, but they were also able to utilize those guys in different areas as well. So I think they're really smart about how they go about things, and I think that just means fantasy success for Jonathan Taylor.
So don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of Jonathan Taylor, so much so to the point I was drafting him in redrafts probably earlier than I should have, especially going into the season with the situation that he had. So that's kind of my disclaimer on to then go into this next point that's going to lead us down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but I think the discussion's worth having. So when you look at it, right, Jonathan Taylor, for the most part through the season, was very frustrating to have on your fantasy roster. So much so that another running back that was very frustrating to have on your roster, and we're going to do a little bit of a blind comparison to this guy from Jonathan Taylor, who we know the stats, we just read it off, all that kind of stuff. But another guy that was a little bit frustrating there, but the narrative, even before free agency started and some of that changed the situation this year, the narrative was completely different going into these two players on how it looked. So we have Jonathan Taylor, right? Player B had 273 rush attempts for 1,065 yards, 12 touchdowns, 33 receptions for 45 targets for 238 through the air. And looking at it going into, as soon as the season ended, most folks were very high on Jonathan Taylor. Most folks were very down on player B, even though output wise was very similar. And when you look at it from a, output production, Jonathan Taylor had 3 top 6 finishes. Player B had 3, and top 12 finishes. Jonathan Taylor had 5. Player B had 6. So you were getting even more, winnable type of weeks from that player. But just kind of curious as to your guys' thoughts on how that narrative changes there. And if you want the player B's name, I will give it to you before you give your opinion.
Is it Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
No.
Oh,
I know
I
who
think
player
Kevin
B
knows.
is.
Yep. Billy, you got an idea who it is?
I was thinking Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs.
It is Josh Jacobs.
Okay.
So, you look at it, right? Both of them finished. One finished at 6, one finished at 8.
Yep.
Production-wise was very similar to it. Josh Jacobs actually had more opportunity there. And even before Kenyon Drake signed with the Raiders this offseason through free agency, if you were listening to kind of the community out there and where people saw them, they were way down on Josh Jacobs and way up on Jonathan Taylor. And that's one of those that I guess the question that I'm ultimately trying to ask is it that finish that brings everybody to it and really rattling off, an amazing finish to the year, to the point where he won some people some championships down the stretch, versus Josh Jacobs, who had a similar output and production with even more weeks inside the top 12, but did it more sporadically throughout the season. So that's kind of the question that I leave.
I definitely think it's that finish over those last 5 games. Jonathan Taylor's worst game was like 19.4 fantasy points, and I think there was a 30 and a 40 burger sprinkled in there as well right at the end of the year. So I think a lot of people might be riding high on that finish carrying through the playoff run, especially it's kind of, if you had to win to get in kind of thing, and you had Jonathan Taylor, he had a 33-point week, got you in the playoffs, rode him as that running back one through the playoffs. I could see people being attached. However, when I look at Josh Jacobs, all I heard last offseason is how he was going to have all this progression in the passing game. That just didn't happen. And it was really kind of dependent on if he did just what he did running the ball, match that, and got the 50 receptions that everybody was talking about him getting, Gruden included, that would have put him up there right in that top 5 range with that PPR upside. However, we just didn't see it happen. And it looks like the Raiders don't believe he's that guy, bringing Kenyon Drake in, a guy who's had 2 50-plus reception seasons already to his credit. So it seems like that just isn't there for Josh Jacobs, and I do feel like Jonathan Taylor might actually be the better receiver when everything's said and done. I just feel like JTT, Jonathan Taylor touchdown, my boy, might be a different caliber back than Josh Jacobs, and with a hell of a lot better situation.
So two things to this, right? And we all knew this last year, going into last year with rookies, right? Without the lack of OTAs and the lack of summer work and the lack of a preseason, that it was going to be tough for rookies to adjust to the league. And for the most part, that played out.
Yes,
that played out, right? And so that's why Jonathan Taylor was so frustrating at the start of the season. The dude was learning how to play in the NFL when the games mattered. He didn't have the beneficiary
of 11 carries a game,
Right. They were working him in because he was making the jump. I don't care how good you think the Big Ten is. It is not the NFL, right? No. Like that's what it is. So we knew that rookies were going to have a slower, kind of build up. And I think maybe only CEH was like the one guy that just kind of burst onto the scene, but he was in a really good situation there in Kansas City. And so, but even then, that wasn't sustained throughout the whole year. And we didn't really see CEH get stronger throughout the course of the season, but we did see that from Jonathan Taylor. We saw him get better week in and week out. We saw him, progress. And to your point, Billy, he put up some really good performances for guys when they're the most memorable, and that's when you need them to win playoff games. I still know who Matt Flynn is because he put up a memorable performance in a meaningful game, right? We ad nauseum have talked about that. But those are the things. Recency bias plays into this, right? And I think I like Jonathan Taylor more because he's in a situation where I trust the head coach a little bit more, and I trust the head coach is going to be a little bit more level-headed when it comes to personnel decisions. Gruden is a firecracker, right? And if you're on his bad side, which can happen at the drop of a hat, you're not going back in the game for the rest of the game. And hell, you might not even be on the team come Monday after a Sunday game, right? Like that is just the way that it works over there. When he is judge, jury, and executioner, I guess he's not now that they've got Mayock in there, but those two guys seem to be lockstep. I like Jonathan Taylor's situation a lot better. I like the longevity of Jonathan Taylor's situation versus Josh Jacobs' situation. So those are two big reasons why I think that the community, as you put it, Derek, was down on Josh Jacobs, was because of those issues that we saw creeping up, and we saw wasn't there some off the field stuff with Josh Jacobs too that happened,
like a DUI, he got in an accident.
Yeah,
that he was never charged with, and yada yada yada.
Right, but all it takes, especially for people that are just reading headlines, right? That's the one that's going to stick with you, is that, he was charged. That he's got off the field issues. That's going to stick in your head. Maybe it didn't happen, whatever it was. But even me, I knew there was some off the field stuff with Josh Jacobs. There was some off the field stuff. It never happened, but I had heard about it, right? And so that's going to affect your opinion on a guy. nevertheless, we haven't had to worry about that with Jonathan Taylor. And again, back to the original point, we knew that rookies were going to take a little bit more time to get acclimated to the league. And that's what we saw with Jonathan Taylor. So the fact that, yeah, he might have been frustrating, but you should have been prepared for that frustration because these rookies did not have all the summer work, the regular training camp, preseason games to play. Those are things that should have been expected going into last season. If you weren't expecting that, you weren't paying attention.
I also kind of feel with Josh Jacobs, we're like still kind of, he's so close to showing you that, taking that next step of being that really awesome running back, that elite guy, because he was drafted in the first round. I feel like with Jonathan Taylor, you watched it for 6 weeks. You got to see it. You saw him cap the year off with 250 and a couple scores against the Jags in a game where he just looked absolutely incredible. And Josh Jacobs really has kind of left you just short of a performance quite like those ones that when you look at the score, the box score, and you're getting killed, and by the end of the day, Jonathan Taylor reeled your opponent in on championship week. Josh Jacobs hasn't done that for you just yet.
Fair enough. I just like I said, it was one of those that it was close enough that it was an interesting thought process to go through there. But no, like I said before we even started this thought process, I'm a fan of Jonathan Taylor. I think that he's going to do amazing, and he's a guy that if you can put him on your team, you should do it. He's going to be a first round type of pick, and depending upon where that falls for you, he could very well be worth the ad there. So any other thoughts on Jonathan Taylor? Y'all ready to talk about the rest of the running backs over there in the Indianapolis?
Moving on.
All righty, guys. So Nyheim Hines is of my computer. Love it. Anyway, so Nyheim Hines last year was a very interesting.
I thought you were going to pull out the ledger. You don't have to stall, man. We know your computer is gone. You don't have to stall with words. I thought you were about to pull out the notebook and be like, hold on, let me pull up the stats here.
I literally was. I had
them.
I got the backup ready to go just in case of computer drama as it has unfolded for me lately. But no, there we go. Just as I was getting it flipped open, the computer decided to pop up there. But
I admire your willingness to stall though while you were trying to pull that up.
Yeah, I was trying. Anything for y'all. All righty, guys. So Nyheim Hines finished as running back 20 last year, only on 89 rush attempts, 380 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 63 receptions on 76 targets for 482 and 4 through the air. Guys, your thoughts on Nyheim Hines?
Nyheim Hines is a great value, honestly, for where you can get him, for how the Colts have used him in years past. Nyheim Hines is a guy that has standalone value. He's not a handcuff per se, but he also is one. They're going to use him all over the field. They've lined him up out wide. They use him in between the tackles and short yardage situations at times. They've used him in the red zone at times. They use him as that scat back. Just really any use that you can think for a running back, Nyheim Hines does fill that role for him. He's very elusive. He's got a great first step. And he's able to get into that secondary and make guys miss. So I think 20 might be his ceiling as some of these guys kind of come back. So I don't see him finishing in RB2 territory, but I do see him finishing inside the top 36. Like he's an RB3. He's a pretty decent flex play depending on how your league construct is and where you're needing him to be. So Nyheim Hines is a guy that, keep an eye on, flag him, wait a little bit. You can get him a little bit later in drafts, but where you end up getting him for his fantasy output is of value. Like, you don't have to spend 5th, 6th, 7th round capital on Nyheim Hines. You can wait a couple more rounds, and as you're filling out your roster, you can get a piece that you can spot start to help you get through some of the thin bye weeks, or if your team gets dinged up with injuries. He's a great guy to help fill in because he has a safe floor. He's going to be catching passes, so you're never going to get a goose egg from him.
Yeah, similar thoughts to you, Kevin. Kind of where you're getting him, he feels like a really solid pick later in those drafts, just because of the talent that he is. If the opportunity were to get a little bit better for him, would be off the chart. So for me, he's kind of a flex guy, best ball option, and I'm much higher on him in Dynasty just because of the age and the talent. I could see him working into a lot of different roles, as Marlon Mack's probably not a Colt after this year. Hines is a really talented guy. Unfortunately, he plays with a guy like JTT, who doesn't necessarily need that passing game specialist as a complement. And I don't see Hines getting any more of a workload than what he did last year with Marlon Mack missing almost all of 2020. So I think we've kind of seen what Nyheim Hines is. He did kind of get back to the form as a rookie, where he caught 60-plus balls. That second year was kind of a low for him, both rushing and receiving. But I have him projected for 61 carries. Limited touches out of the backfield do cap his value. For me, I think that RB20 is that's kind of the max of what you're going to get. But a really quality player still, where you're drafting to be RB20 is pretty impressive. But I will be keeping an eye on his usage, as I can see him getting some significant work in the slot. If Parris Hilton ends up injured again, or T.Y. Hilton ends up missing some time, Nyheim Hines is a guy that could step up in the passing game and become a more important part, or a bigger role in that team with Carson Wentz if someone misses some time. He feels like a quality choice when you get him late in these drafts, like I said. But unfortunately, on a week-to-week basis, there's going to be a few booms and a lot of bust weeks. We're not going to be able to rely on him. But like I said, if somebody misses time, he's kind of the next man up in both the rushing game and the passing game. So definitely an intriguing pick with these Colts moving forward.
So here's, just for context to how Billy and I are talking about this, here's some of the guys who are going around where Nyheim Hines is going. Kenyon Drake, James Conner, J.D. McKissick, Jeffrey Wilson, pre-injury. Now that obviously has fallen way off. But A.J. Dillon, Devin Singletary, Latavius Murray, Tony Pollard, Gus Edwards, Zach Moss. Like, those are guys going the round before, the same round, and the round after Nyheim Hines. Like,
other than Kenyon Drake, there's a big gap for me with Hines and most of those guys, just talent-wise,
Yeah, I completely agree with that. McKissick, another guy who had a very big year last year, catching a ton of balls out of the backfield. We talked about him when we went over the Washington football team. But Devin Singletary or Nyheim Hines, like, that's a no-brainer. And they're going
Absolutely.
2 picks apart. Nyheim Hines is averaging, or 4 picks apart, excuse me. Nyheim Hines is going about 92nd overall. Devin Singletary is going 95th overall. Like, that's a no-brainer, guys. Like, if that's what you're left with, you smash Nyheim Hines for some running back depth, for a guy that can help you out, and you move on and save the battle for a later day. Like, where he's the tier, if you will, the draft tier that he's going in, he's really kind of top of that class as far as the ability to produce and give you a positive outcome in the fantasy football realm. Like, he's just not going to hang you with a 1-point dog turd week. He's safe for 5 to 7 points with the upside of 25 points.
Yeah, to Alex's point, just trusting that coaching staff, I'm pretty confident that Frank Reich's going to find something for Nyheim Hines to do, or some of these teams like Singletary. If I'm sitting in the 9th round and I'm looking at the running backs available, and the guy right before me picks Devin Singletary, and I get Nyheim Hines, I'm really happy about how that round worked out. That's for damn sure.
All right, so I'm going back to the 2017 Eagles, which was the last time we saw Carson Wentz and Frank Reich together, right?
And
It was pretty. It was very pretty, and it was remarkably unbalanced football in that they ran the ball a lot when that happened, when those two were together. So they ran the ball almost 473 times that season that they ran the ball. They did throw the ball, quite a bit too, 555 times. And keep in mind, Carson Wentz only played, I believe it was like 13 games that year. I think he got hurt in week 13, so 12 games, something like that. But the distribution in terms of running the football was pretty spread out. Now LeGarrette Blount was obviously the guy that was the bell cow back, if you will. He had 100 more attempts than any other player on the roster. But then they still had two guys that had over 70 attempts, rushing attempts. They had Corey Clement, they had Jay Ajayi, and then Carson Wentz was the fourth leading rush attempt on that at 64. Now, keep in mind, Carson Wentz is not a spring chicken anymore. He does have the knee injury, right? So those numbers will come down. Those rushing numbers will come down. And sure, a lot of those were probably pass plays. Not all of those were designed runs, but a fair amount of them were in that year. So the Colts are going to run the football. And Jonathan Taylor is not going to run the football 240 times. Those carries are going to get spread out. And if they can get back to, running the football over 400 times throughout the course of the season, that ball's got to go somewhere. It's got to go in somebody's stomach. Now, the thing that was a little concerning, and I thought the numbers were a little bit better until I went and looked, was the receiving work out of the backfield. Because I thought that maybe Carson Wentz was spotting these guys a little bit more out of the backfield. But he never really had a great receiving back out of those three. I mean, it was LeGarrette Blount, Corey Clement, and Jay Ajayi. Not dudes exactly known for their hands out of the backfield. And when you had, a Zach Ertz that was, kind of a security blanket for Carson and got the ball a lot, plus some other bigger receivers, you didn't really have to use backfield that much. But again, Carson Wentz has been in the league longer now. He understands defenses more now. He understands the speed of the game. And so they're going to do things where they will, I think, get the running backs involved in the passing game. I think that instead of running, he's going to look to dump off to that running back. I think that is more likely than it was in 2017. So basically, all of that to say that Nyheim Hines has value because they're going to get him involved. And if they run the football as much as they want to, Nyheim Hines is going to get his fair share of carries. And he'll get the passing work because he's a proven pass catcher out of the backfield. So there is value there. It is dependent upon where you get that value. I don't think you'll want to reach for it, but if you get him at the right spot, to Kevin's point, he's not exactly a handcuff, but if Jonathan Taylor does go down, oh boy, I mean, he steps right up into potential RB1 territory week in and week out because of how much I think they're going to want to run the football and control the clock. To me, I know that we'll talk about Carson Wentz in a little bit, but when the Eagles were really good and when they were winning games, Carson Wentz was throwing the football 25 times or less. They were running the football a lot more, 40 times a game. And so that is going to be, I think, the recipe that they're going to try and cook up week in and week out. Is that they're going to try to limit how much Carson Wentz's right arm, how much they have to win on Carson Wentz's right arm versus how much they can win on the legs of Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines.
Fair enough. I mean, that is a team built to run the ball, and I think you'll see Jonathan Taylor up there around that probably 270 to 300 carry mark when it's all said and done. You'll see Marlon Mack. They will roll him out there for some spelling on that, and he'll probably still see somewhere around maybe 100 touches. So there's a very good chance that they could get to that 400 mark that you're talking about, Alex. I could definitely see that happening. Before we move on over to the wide receiver room, though, guys, any desire to talk about the Marlon Mack? I
think we have to at least address the elephant in the room, in that the Colts have decided to bring Marlon Mack back, a 1-year deal. It's $2 million. I do think he's going to spell Jonathan Taylor in some areas. Here's why I think they really brought him back is part of the reason and the situations that kept Jonathan Taylor off the field early in the season was his pass protection wasn't quite there. It is one of the more difficult things for young running backs to kind of master as they come into the NFL is being able to keep your quarterback upright. Now, while some would argue the fact that the Colts quarterback is not injury prone.
Health resistant.
Yes,
it's health resistant.
Yes, he's not injury prone, but he is a little health resistant. And you put an investment into getting Carson Wentz. You have this young receiving core. You need to make sure your quarterback is there because now you don't have Jacoby Brissett being able to bail anybody out in case of injury. So Marlon Mack is there. I think he's going to do a lot of the pass blocking, guys. Like, I do think you're going to see him mixed in on some obvious passing down situations to kind of bring in and help chip that linebacker or chip on that D end coming off the edge and give maybe one of the tackles a little bit of help if they're having a rough day. But I think that's what Marlon Mack's role is going to be as we see him come back from this Achilles injury. But Marlon Mack in his own right does have some standalone value. Like, we've seen him play very well for this Colts team. So while I don't think he's going to usurp Jonathan Taylor, I do think he's going to serve a function in this offense. Derek, I think you're probably right. I think somewhere around 75 to 85 touches is probably in the realm of possibility for Marlon Mack, but a lot of what he's going to be doing is going to be protection based. His job is going to make sure Carson Wentz can play 17 football games for the Indianapolis Colts and lead them back into the playoffs and take a run at the Super Bowl this season.
One thing, too, to Alex's point, when he was playing really well in Philadelphia, they ran the ball a whole lot more, which opened up Carson Wentz to run a lot more play action, which just makes it kind of easier when you get guys stepping down the box. Now, Jonathan Taylor is going to make sure that those boxes are loaded all the time to make things easy on Carson Wentz. That's kind of why we're starting to get really high on guys like Michael Pittman, who we'll talk about here in a minute. However, I love that opportunity for him to have all these running backs that can kind of all do a little bit of everything. Because Marlon Mack, he can catch the ball to the backfield as well. We've seen him play really well, in time when he's had a chance. He has been a bit banged up, missed a lot of time, but he's a talented dude. Back-to-back seasons as a low-end RB2, and he was running back 21 in 12 games in 2018. But he's coming off that Achilles injury, which is really one of the more concerning injuries for a player to get back to be his former self pre-injury with the quickness and cutting. Those kind of things can be a concern for a running back. And I just think that JTT's on a different level as a football player. But I do have Marlon Mack projected for around 400 rushing yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns with very limited work in the passing game. I think they're just looking to keep him healthy in case they need him while he gets back and maybe works into an opportunity. But also one thing that I think caps the passing game opportunity for Marlon Mack is, 1, the talent that JTT and Nyheim Hines are, and 3, Carson Wentz only throws to the running back 15.8% of the time over his career, which is like 21st or 2nd in the league of the starters that are in the league right now. So, but like you said, I don't think Marlon Mack's going to play that role. I think he's going to do a lot of pass blocking situations where they're blitzing, 2-minute drill stuff where you got the guy with the experience in the brain that won't make the mistake in the game, and I think he makes some big plays in that role.
That's the biggest point right there, the experience and the brain. And those things are invaluable when it comes to bringing along a young running back, is being able to pick the brain of somebody. Now, sure, Nyheim Hines has played in more games than Marlon Mack, but that's because Marlon Mack missed an entire season. He played 1 game last year. Or appeared in 1 game last year. So that to me is another reason why you bring a guy like Marlon Mack back, is because he can help along and keep continuing to teach pass blocking, pass pro and all of that stuff, even when he's not at 100% himself. And then, hey, when you do get a guy back to 100%, you've got fresh legs because he hasn't played, it's just a bonus. So I totally understand why they bring him back for personnel purposes. Not every play or not every personnel decision is based on what a guy can do on the field. And Marlon Mack, that's just kind of what this situation kind of screams to me, is that he's a guy that they want to keep in the locker room, a guy that they want to help along in this running back room, because he just understands what they'd like to get accomplished.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And love the question there from Real Ryan Hicks, another fantasy first rounder tuning in to watch old Billy there. But is this a viable 3 RB situation potentially with Jonathan Taylor still being an elite RB1? And he thinks it could be. And I do agree with that. And I think all of us have agreed with that one as well. Just wanted to make sure we mentioned that one. Do you have something, Alex?
It's just the word viable is the big crutch word there. Like that's the very big word. Viable, yes. I think all 3 running backs are going to contribute, and JTT will be a top 5, top 6 running back in the league. But viable is such a broad word in that there will be 2 other guys, for sure. One other guy, I think we're all in agreement there that Nyheim Hines is going to be. He has standalone value, but I mean, it's a wait and see situation with Marlon Mack right now.
Right. And I like I said, I think you're going to see Jonathan Taylor with well over 300 opportunities this year. You'll see Marlon Mack with right around 100, and you'll see Nyheim Hines with probably right around 100 to kind of get to where you were talking about that magical 400 number there, Alex, when it comes to these guys and getting their touches. But any other thoughts on the running back room before we head to the wide receivers? Alrighty, guys, let's go ahead and head on over to the wide receiver room. We'll start with the wily veteran over there who is coming back. T.Y. Hilton finished as wide receiver 40 last year, 56 receptions, 93 targets for 762 and 5 through the air. Guys, your thoughts on T.Y. Hilton?
I was actually kind of impressed with T.Y. Hilton coming off the injury the year before. We kind of didn't know what to expect because he really looked like a shell of himself. Being the speedster, kind of aging, and kind of the quarterback turnover in that offense. But we did see him average 13.6 yards per catch last year, which is pretty good for a 31-year-old X-speed deep threat wide receiver. And I was kind of impressed how they kind of changed his game. He was running more routes, more digs, more comebacks, less deep shots, really letting T.Y. Hilton just be a route-running number 1 wide receiver. And him and Phillip Rivers kind of got it going a little bit last year. 700+ yards receiving, but coming into this year, he's still a wide receiver 4 or 5 to me. I haven't ranked him that mid 40s range, just because the upside of the T.Y. Hilton that we know and love isn't there anymore. He doesn't run a 4.3 anymore. He's just a different player nowadays, albeit still a very good player. But we did see his catch percentage drop from 66 to 60. I feel like that's a pretty relevant stat. For a guy, and he just isn't that guy that averaged 16 yards per catch anymore, like I said. But I do think he could be helped out by the Carson Wentz addition and help him return to relevancy. Health is a concern. Younger guys are a concern as well. I have him projected for about 58 catches, 800 yards, 5 touchdown range, which would be a little bit of an improvement from last year with Phillip Rivers, and I think Carson Wentz does provide that. However, I do think it's kind of capped there. But I do think Frank Reich could get, a little bit creative with T.Y. Hilton and start running a little more underneath stuff with him and let him be that guy that gets, to be the target hog. It'll be interesting to see how his role shapes with the new quarterback play as Michael Pittman and Parris Campbell kind of take over as the guy that Wentz will be targeting downfield more. But make no mistake, they wanted T.Y. Hilton back. They're very happy to have him. And I think he is a bit of veteran leadership in that wide receiver room. That's going to help kind of keep things running. As Marlon Mack, we just talked about in the running back room, it's important to keep everybody kind of, on the same page, everybody on the same page and working together. You need those vets, especially with the new quarterback at the helm. I think it'd be very important that he's still there while we see what Michael Pittman and Parris Campbell can be before it's time to bail on these younger guys that, have shown flashes, but really underwhelmed overall.
I love the value you can get on T.Y. Hilton right now. He is kind of the forgotten man with some of the injuries, even though he's fought through those. Obviously, all the quarterback changes from from Andrew Luck to Jacoby Brissett to Phillip Rivers, now to Carson Wentz. Like it's a lot of chemistry that he's trying to build up and redo and everything else. But I like the value on Ty. I like the fact that you can get him in like the 10th round, and he is a viable flex play for the wide receiver position. I think he poses clear wide receiver 2 upside. Now, I say that I'm talking like 21, 22, 23. I'm not talking, up at 15 necessarily or getting ready to crack wide receiver 1, but I think that ability is there. Yes, he is going to be kind of that, like Derek said, the wily veteran. He's the guy who understands the mechanics of an offense, and working with Andrew Luck and Phillip Rivers has had the opportunity to work with some very good minds that play under center. And he'll be able to articulate that and build that chemistry with Carson Wentz. They'll be able to share with each other what they like, what they don't like, what they're seeing on the field. And I do see that natural combination because of their ability to sit in a film room and study together and share their thoughts and opinions. I do think that chemistry is going to be there probably a little bit quicker than anybody else in that receiving room. And so for all these reasons, T.Y. is another guy. I'm going to flag him. I'm going to keep an eye on him. He's a nice depth piece. He from what I'm seeing, shows a good bit of upside. He has found ways for even being a smaller guy to make himself useful inside the red zone. Like he's not just that deep ball guy. He's kind of evolved, if you will, as his age comes into moving the chains. He'll slide in between the linebackers and the safeties and catch the ball and fall down real quick, as you see these wily veterans do as they get older. They don't take the big hits. T.Y. Hilton's never been knocked out of a game necessarily. His has been some soft tissue injuries, some freak injuries with a hamstring on one leg, a quad on the other. He was fighting an ankle 2 years ago. So it's not the same injury that's been keeping him down. It's been a couple different ones, which I think is a good thing because you're not focused in on one specific body part. Guys who have chronic hamstring issues are a big flag to me, but that's not T.Y. His has been a sprinkle of this, that, and everything in between. So I like T.Y. a lot. I like the value that you can get him at.
Yeah, I think T.Y. is a complementary piece to a fantasy football roster. He's not a guy that you're obviously going to build your wide receiver room around, but he is definitely a guy that if you get him on your roster and you get him at the right spot, he will contribute, right? He's not going to be, I don't think he's going to have any of those blow you out of the water performances, but I think it's safe. He's a safe play week in and week out. Hopefully, he should be a safe play if, we see what happens with the offseason here, but you can kind of depend on what you're going to get out of T.Y. Hilton. And that's a good complementary piece to have in fantasy football.
Yeah, play him twice a year against the Pintos Texans. I promise you, it's worth your time.
Absolutely. 100%. Absolutely. This was one of those that too, when you kind of saw T.Y. paired up with Carson, I had a little bit of some flashbacks to some of the older days when you saw Carson and Deshaun Jackson kind of paired up. It kind of brought that same kind of feeling on how that could come to play. And especially like in a best ball format, love that type of thing because T.Y. can certainly be a guy that's going to pop off and give you a wide receiver 1 week and is a guy that you don't have to spend much capital on to get those big weeks. And so best ball, absolutely love that type of format there. And where he's being taken, even in redraft, I like that simply from the standpoint that Kevin already mentioned it, tremendous value there. So not a guy that you have to spend up on and a guy that you can easily put on there as your 4th or even 5th wide receiver onto your roster for a little bit of depth and a guy that can be usable week to week if you need to. So Guys, any other thoughts on T.Y. Hilton? Cool. Let's go ahead and talk about, you got Ryan Hicks real excited there with a capital P and exclamation point Pittman. Michael Pittman Jr. last year finished as wide receiver 81, 40 receptions, 61 targets, 503 and 1 through the air. Guys, your thoughts on Michael Pittman?
I'm pretty high on Pittman coming into this year. Obviously, being a Colts fan, I'm really hopeful he's going to take that next step. He's a wide receiver 3 for me with that wide receiver 2 upside. Dynasty, he's a top 15 guy, in my opinion. But he's actually a guy, looking at his 2020 performance, he really underwhelmed, only having 2 double-digit fantasy point performances, and they came in back-to-back weeks. But I think the potential is definitely there. And I like him a lot more thanks to Carson Wentz's arrival. We've talked about with almost everybody. All he did was just lift everybody up to that next tier of potential. But I do think he's a high-risk, high-reward type player in 2021. And you look back to those 2017 Eagles that Alex alluded to earlier, and there's no reason to think he won't play a similar role in this offense to what Alshon Jeffrey did. Alshon had a relatively good season, 120 targets, but only 57 receptions. I'd like to think that over 50% completion percentage roll into Pittman is a doable feat. But still, 789 yards, 9 touchdowns. That's relatively good. But I really think Michael Pittman's upside is a little bit higher, as I think he'll do a better job catching those deep shots than Alshon Jeffrey did off that play action like we talked about earlier. So I think Michael Pittman could be a huge breakout guy this year if he could somehow work into the targets. Only 40 receptions last year. That's not a lot to go off of.
I love me some Michael Pittman. Ryan, if you are still listening, get your hallelujah hands working here, man. Michael Pittman will finish as wide receiver 17 this season. Michael Pittman suffered from being a rookie wide receiver coming in. He got dinged up with an injury early in the season. T.Y. went down. Parris Campbell went down. Phillip Rivers was an old guy, and they were kind of struggling. They were working in 3 different running backs at the time because Marlon Mack went down. The Colts were floundering at the skill position set. Like Zach Pascal was the only one with knowledge of the offense.
Oh, man.
And Pittman, it just took him a little bit. He is a subject A example of why we said pass on the rookie wide receivers. It's not because the talent isn't there. Pittman he's an elite talent. He really is, guys. He got overshadowed by Justin Jefferson, yes. But playing in this Colts offense, the fact that they're going to have to stack the box to stop Jonathan Taylor, the fact that you love that Carson Wentz likes to throw that deep ball. He is that big-bodied guy going down the field. He will have a lot of opportunities there, on top of the fact of he has really good body control. He can go up. He high points the ball well. He does a good job locating it. And as you saw in the playoff loss against the Bills, they started to move him around a little bit, right? Like he started to get in between as he started to understand defenses a little bit more, because that Bills secondary was no joke. And Pittman was consistently open in that playoff loss against the Bills. I expect big things out of him. That 1 touchdown that he got last year, he's going to blow that out of the way in the first quarter in 2021, and then the sky's going to be the limit. He will finish as a clear-cut wide receiver 2 in 2021.
I co-sign with that. Pittman, Carson Wentz likes to throw to these bigger-bodied guys, and to your point, Billy, Alshon Jeffrey type, right? And if Alshon Jeffrey wouldn't have dropped 60% of those freaking balls thrown his way, he would have had a, borderline MVP season that year. That's completely, if you're not a quarterback, you're not winning the MVP, but it would have been a really, really good season. So that if Michael Pittman, last I checked, does not have bricks for hands, so I assume that those catch, that the balls that'll be thrown his way, he'll be okay with catching those. So yeah, Kevin, I'm with you there. I'm comfortable saying that he's comfortably in wide receiver 2 territory. I think it was tough last year as a rookie trying to figure out Phillip Rivers, who was clearly, there with one goal in mind. And that was, I'm going to extend my career. I'm going to make a run at it because it didn't work in San Diego /LA. We're just going to try to make a run for it. And they ran into the buzzsaw that was the Bills before they ran into the buzzsaw that was the Chiefs. So I just think that you get the benefit of these OTAs. We've already seen, some of these OTA work. We know that Carson Wentz is going to do everything that he can to bring along these receivers. I saw it firsthand when he brought, I think it was all, if not most, if not all, I should say, of the Eagles wide receivers spent a week and a half in northern Minnesota with Carson Wentz on a lake, just getting to know each other and trying to, figure things out and trying to build chemistry off the field. And then they worked out in Fargo a couple of times and we got to see that. But that's what, Carson Wentz is going to do. And I think that's just going to benefit a Michael Pittman, a guy who's still, learning the ropes of the NFL. And it's unfair to judge him off of last season because he did have a few things working against him. He had a veteran quarterback that probably didn't have time to bring along a rookie wide receiver because he was so focused on, we need to win now. He became the guy when he wasn't supposed to be the guy because of injuries. And it was just, it was a rookie, I mean, it was a rookie in a pandemic year. And I think those worked against him leading up to it. So one touchdown is like Kevin said, I wouldn't be surprised if he catches the first touchdown of the season for the Indianapolis Colts. And, it wouldn't be out of the question to see him with, 7 or 8 when the season's done.
And another thing about Phillip Rivers is a lot of his most prolific success was with Antonio Gates and Vincent Jackson, that offense that so much of that was backyard football. It was just those guys' communication and knowing each other so well that it's really hard to go to Indianapolis. You've got T.Y. Hilton, doesn't really fit the mold of any of those big Chargers receivers that he had. He never had a guy like that. Pittman kind of did fit that mold, but he's a little bit different skill set and a guy that needs to be used a lot different than knowing where to be, kind of as Phillip Rivers, just the plays break down. So that's just another testament to the lack of the offseason preparation, the lack of time with Phillip Rivers, and really, like you said, Alex, Phillip Rivers' focus was not let's make this kid good. It's how many games can we win right here, right now. So Carson Wentz coming in really changes the dynamic of who and what Michael Pittman is in this offense, and he's got to be the focal point of the passing game moving forward. He just has to be that guy. So I think Carson Wentz, they will put that time in. Like you said, he likes to get together with his guys and get that stuff ironed out quickly so that the rest of it is just flat out going out and playing football and not having to think about it. And I think that'll really bode well. A rookie, old quarterback, new offense, all the no offseason did not help Michael Pittman, but we did get to see a couple flashes of what he could be. And a guy with that kind of size is also a red zone threat as well. And we know Carson Wentz loves big bodies in the red zone. So, I mean, if Michael Pittman had double-digit touchdowns, I would not be surprised in this offense and the way they're going to run it.
No, absolutely not. I think that Pittman is fantastic. Alex, you were asking your question earlier about, Michael Pittman's hands. I think JB Cho answers your deal there with what he thinks of the hands there. They're pretty darn good. But when you look at it too, right, like we spent a lot of time earlier in this episode really just talking up Jonathan Taylor and how great Jonathan Taylor is and all of these things, which he is. But when you look at it too from an organizational perspective, the Colts in 2020 were sitting on the clock early in the second round, and they had the choice between Michael Pittman or Jonathan Taylor, and they went Michael Pittman over Jonathan Taylor. That's something that typically kind of gets forgotten in the wash there, is that the Colts drafted Michael Pittman over Jonathan Taylor, sitting there on that, and they took Jonathan Taylor just 7 picks later type of thing. But it was one of those that, they're sitting on the clock and they're not worried about the fact that, hey, if we pass on Jonathan Taylor, they made their choice about who is going to be very impactful for that, and they spent the draft capital there. And so the team has a lot invested in him, and when you look at it from a standpoint of, trying to put receivers on and trying to add players to your fantasy roster, I want players that the team is very invested in, and they proved that last year with some of that draft capital going into it. And I think you'll see him make a progression and see some good things going forward. Guys, any other thoughts on Michael Pittman Jr.? All righty, let's go ahead and head on over to Parris Campbell, who, man, I was really, really upset when he went out in that first week with that injury. I know that on this show, we were hyping him up and talking big time to it. And JB Cho asked a question on there that, are we liking Parris Campbell or Pittman? And this actually leads into a perfect question as well before we really start talking, kind of tying Parris Campbell in there with the rest of these wide receivers. On Sports Me earlier today, posted the question of, who do you like more? Who are you drafting? Who are you actively targeting? Who are you going after with their ADP in this Colts wide receiver room? Is it Hilton? Is it Pittman? Is it Campbell? So, guys, give me your thoughts on Parris Campbell and tell me out of those three who you're drafting.
So Parris Campbell, the fact that this guy still has some fantasy relevance and there are people that are really, really high on him is really just kind of a testament to the talent that he was at Ohio State. Caught 90 balls as a senior, but he's only played 9 games in 2 seasons since the Colts drafted him. Coming out of college, ran that 4.31, which is a lot faster than I was expecting, especially for a guy that was averaging under 12 yards a catch. It is kind of an odd skill set. He reminds me of a Jarvis Landry kind of type player where he's going to get a lot of volume catches, but maybe not rack up a whole bunch of yards as he's, kind of stays close over the middle of the field. But he is extremely talented. I'm liking the role that he's expected to have in this offense, and the PPR upside is unreal if he can just somehow stay on the field. But for me, it's Michael Pittman. I feel like he's just that guy could be a legitimate wide receiver one, where Parris Campbell is always going to be the complement to Michael Pittman as he develops, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I am avoiding Parris Campbell because I don't trust him. I just don't trust him. He's given me no reason to trust him. He has only 30 more touches than the 4 of us combined in the NFL. And the 4 of us combined have played 0 games in the NFL, I think. So
do my dreams count?
Kevin?
No.
It's still 0? Okay. And that in 2 years, it just does not bode well. And I know that, after a while, you have to start to think that maybe this isn't the exception and maybe this is the rule. And I'm starting to lean more into that camp of it is the rule and not the exception, that he can't stay healthy and he cannot play a game, not even a half season, he can't even play a half of a season. So I am out on Parris Campbell, and it would be great if he would prove me wrong. But that's just not a risk that I'm willing to take.
Parris Campbell is my ultimate sleeper of sleepers this year. I freaking love Parris Campbell. I love that I can pick him up in the 14th or 15th round. I love the fact that everyone's completely dogging on him because he had an MCL issue. How many NFL players have not had an MCL issue? And here's the deal. I still think he's better than F1. I've said this since they were drafted. Parris Campbell is better than Terry McLaurin. McLaurin has had more opportunities. Sure. McLaurin has had the benefit of health. Absolutely. But raw talent and athletic ability, I will take Parris Campbell over Terry McLaurin. I love what this kid can do. The Colts have done absolutely nothing but pump this kid up from the day they drafted him, through the injuries, through the recovery, through the other injury, through recovery again. They're so excited to see this guy back on the field. And you saw it week 1 of last year, guys. 7 receptions on 11 targets for, 78, 88 yards, something like that. You saw the vision of what they want to do with Parris Campbell. His knee just got blown out. So now there's the recovery, but it happened early. So he has basically a full calendar year, or at least 10 months, to recover from an injury like that. Yeah, he might get off to a bit of a slow start as he's knocking some of the rust off of it. But if Parris Campbell can stay healthy, he is a guy that you will pick up in the 14th round that I do think will finish in wide receiver 2 territory. Now, I know that I've repeated myself like that a lot this segment about the wide receivers, because that is my bold prediction for 2021. The Indianapolis Colts will have 3 receivers finish in wide receiver 2 territory. And it's not necessarily because of the volume of Carson Wentz throwing the football, but it is the efficiency. It goes back to the offensive line play. It goes back to all the attention that Jonathan Taylor that he demands, right? You have to keep safeties close in. You can't just play back the whole game. Otherwise, Taylor will eat you up. And it comes from lots and lots of time from the O-line. I still think it's the best offensive line in football. It's definitely top 3, and it is by far the best offensive line that Carson Wentz has ever seen in his life. So Parris Campbell, I love it. I love the fact that they're going to play him in the slot. Then him and T.Y. will switch it up a little bit. Parris Campbell will go outside. T.Y. will play in the slot. So he'll get his deep chances too as safeties slide over because Pittman beat him, or if safeties are cheating up because Jonathan Taylor's burned him. I love Parris Campbell, guys. I can't scream about this enough. He is my dog, and I am more than happy to take him in the 14th round in any draft to go ahead and stash him. And about week 3 or 4, when everyone goes, oh, hey, come pick this guy up off your waiver wire because he's the real deal now, I'm just going to sit there and say, not too late, already had him, and he's actually beat you the last 2 weeks and going to continue to stomp your ass in the mud for the rest of the season.
2 things real quick before Derek, you get going. One, the 2014 and 2015 North Dakota State Bison would like to have a word about the best offensive line that Carson Wentz has ever seen. And
Aren't
secondly,
there's a big difference between what they're putting out and what the NFL has. Come on now.
Yeah, wasn't this the guy that just a little bit ago talked all about the Big Ten is not the same as the NFL, and there's a huge come on,
I'm just saying in terms of level of competition, right? You can only play against who you've got. You can only play against who you're playing against. Second thing, and this is the cliche that I think it bodes true here. Sometimes the best ability is availability, and right now Parris Campbell is not available. And he hasn't shown that he can be.
Keenan Allen wasn't either.
He's not injury prone. He's just health resistant right now.
Right.
So,
Keenan Allen was injury riddled his first couple seasons, and now we can't get enough of Keenan Allen.
I'm with you there, but for right now, and how long did it take for people to get back on the Keenan Allen train? That's all I'm saying.
About the first season after he blew up.
Yeah.
So I'm jumping on it a season earlier than everybody else. I'll stand on that. I'll plant that flag and stand on it. I'm cool with that.
Yep. Actually, Kevin, I didn't know I knew you were high on Parris Campbell. I didn't know that you were that high on Parris Campbell.
Oh, I love it.
So I dropped the Mike FF stopping by saying, what's up, guys? Mike, thanks for stopping by. Always a fun time having you hang out. Thanks for checking it out. Kevin, it actually takes me back to a text message conversation you and I were talking about when we were trying to work a deal. And, as a Parris Campbell was kind of put into the mix there. And I told you, I just can't do it. I can't give up Parris Campbell in that situation. And I think my exact wording was I see him like I see Preston Williams last year. For those of you that were watching the show before the season last year, you know how incredibly high on Preston Williams I was going into the season. And that was my super deep, breakout type of sleeper there. And I had him finishing in wide receiver 2 territory, a guy. And that's how I see Parris Campbell. Again, I don't know that I'm going to say that I'm probably about that far behind you on the bandwagon with Parris Campbell, but I'm definitely right there with you, Kevin. He's a guy that I think will blow up. I think you will see him have be able to put it together and see the healthy season. I think that you're going to see them move him around, get him in the mix. And I think that this is going to be the year that, I could very well see him scoring the most fantasy points from the wide receivers in that room. Like I think Michael Pittman will do some amazing things. I think T.Y. Hilton will do some amazing things, but I do believe that when the dust is all settled at the end of the season, Parris Campbell will score the most fantasy points of the three of them. So that's kind of where I've got him. And he's going to be right there I don't see him getting all the way up in wide receiver 1, but he's going to be very high in wide receiver 2 territory for me when we get those rankings done. I have started working through that, just haven't finished it, but that's about where I'm projecting him going into it. Guys, any other thoughts on the wide receiver room? And yes, JB Cho knows that is a bold take. So, but fortune favors the bold, so we'll just be bold, I guess. That's how you win leagues, is taking some of those things, but with a 14th pick, you can be bold all you want. So let's go ahead and
I think I made Billy blush with that one for a second. He's like, "Damn, I thought I was a Colts fan."
Yeah, no kidding, man. I love it.
All righty, guys, let's go ahead and move on over to the tight end room. And Ryan Hicks thinks that Mo Alley Cox is sneaky tight end dependent dude this year. I would agree with that, but we're going to go ahead and start with the guy that's most likely going to be ahead on the depth chart there. And that's Jack Doyle, who was Alex's big sleeper going into last year. I didn't forget, but he finished as tight end 39 last year. 20 receptions for 251 and 3 touchdowns. Any real desire to talk about Jack Doyle, or is he even fantasy relevant for y'all this year?
Oh,
he is
no,
absolutely
no.
fantasy relevant because Carson Wentz loves his tight ends.
Oh, he loves him some tight ends. That
Now,
sounded way dirtier than it should have.
I am not as high on Doyle as I am the receivers, but Doyle is absolutely going to help them. Drop the mic. The Colts starting tight end will be Zach Ertz.
He may not be wrong.
Come this time tomorrow, we might know.
So, and if it is, then yeah, we might have to retake this segment. But Doyle was a product of Phillip Rivers just being a goofball. Like Jack Doyle was there in the areas that Phillip Rivers needed him to. Rivers, it seems, just is running a completely different offense. Like he wasn't grasping the concepts or what it was, but Rivers had always been able to lean on a tight end, whether it was Antonio Gates or with Hunter Henry. And hell, he even was able to use Virgil Green in a couple of different ways when he was with San Diego / LA. Like Jack Doyle was a natural pick for a tight end, a solid tight, a breakout candidate, or at least a solid tight end year. And Phillip Rivers just completely forgot he was on the field. Like he was absolutely ridiculous. They used him a little bit more in run blocking sets for whatever reason, because Mo Alley Cox is a better run blocker than Jack Doyle. Like, I don't understand how they used him last year, but I do think that changes because how Carson Wentz likes the tight end position. So I see a couple more targets being floated his way. He's still a tight end too, guys. Like he'll finish like tight end 17, 18, something like that. So I'm not saying that Jack Doyle is a guy that we need to covet and go after. But if you're playing in a 2 tight end league, I'm going to tell you there's worse options. I'm also going to tell you that there's better options than Jack Doyle. Like the intrigue is there because of how Carson Wentz values that position as opposed to throwing to the running backs, right? Where it might hamper Nyheim Hines, like what we talked about earlier. He does favor tight ends a little bit. It is his security blanket. Now, it's also, again, a better offensive line. He's going to have a chance to move the ball further down the field, stay on some progressions a little bit longer. So better season, but not a season good enough that I'm targeting Jack Doyle. Like he's he's the guy I'm looking at in the 16th round as a late tight end, and you got to grab him. I'm not going to tell you that, guys, but I'm going to tell you, flag him, put him on your watch list, because if he gets hot, I could see a good hot streak roll for this guy 2-3 weeks at a time and then cool off as he kind of fades off into the sunset.
Okay, so I'm not as high on Jack Doyle this year as I was around this time last year, which everything Kevin said, right? Like that made perfect sense. Jack Doyle, good pass catching tight end. Phillip Rivers loves him a tight end. Could use Antonio Gates. Was effective with Hunter Henry. It just all of the stars, all of the stuff on paper seemed like Jack Doyle. This is going to be a great year for Jack Doyle, and then it just wasn't. And I'm still trying to figure out why it just wasn't. In fact, I honestly went and looked to see if Jack Doyle got hurt last year because I was trying to figure out why were his stats so bad? Because I had a ton of shares of Jack Doyle, and then he got thrown into the wasteland of my bench / off the roster. It just was not working out. So hopefully, with the amount that Carson Wentz loves to throw out to the tight end, that will be kind of a resurgence of Jack Doyle. And he will have some fantasy relevance because he's a tight end in a Carson Wentz-led offense, and we have no reason to expect that Carson Wentz is going to change how he goes through things, how they run the offense. Think back to that 2017 year, and I hate to keep going back to that, but Zach Ertz was prominently featured in that offense. And while Jack Doyle is not Zach Ertz when it comes to pass catching, he's pretty comparable and serviceable. And that's going to warrant, at least keeping your eye on Jack Doyle. And, to Kevin's point, yes, there are guys that will be better than Jack Doyle, but there are definitely options worse than Jack Doyle.
And Jack Doyle's a really talented tight end. We saw him have over 100 targets a few years back and be really productive. I think he's had 3 years of 70 or more targets. But last year was just like really, really awkward to your guys' point. I mean, Mo Alley Cox had more targets and outplayed Jack Doyle. He's not a better tight end. He may be a better run blocker, but he's not a better fantasy purposes tight end, in my opinion. Now, my only concern is in this tight end room, they did spend a 4th-round pick on Kylan Granson out of SMU, who's a really athletic pass-catching guy, and I think they're going to want to use all these guys. To your guys' point, like we say, Carson Wentz doesn't throw the running backs a lot, really favors his tight end. Here's how much. 32.4% of the time he's thrown to the tight end. There's only one other guy alive that threw to the tight end over 25% of the time. That's Marcus Mariota. Everybody else under 25%. So that's a significant gap between Carson Wentz and the next guy. Now, some of that's a testament to Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz in their prime. Zach Ertz in his prime with Carson Wentz in that Philadelphia offense. However, some of that is a bit of Carson Wentz's tendency, and there's a reason why they bolstered that tight end group up as well, because they plan to use him. I wouldn't be surprised if Zach Ertz doesn't make his way onto this roster before it's all said and done because of the familiarity, and nobody else really seems to be going after Zach Ertz. Maybe a Buffalo, but if he does end up in Indy, I think he puts together a real nice showing, as he would be the far superior tight end. I feel like you don't go get Zach Ertz to let Jack Doyle have a significant role that's going to really cut into, Ertz being that clear-cut tight end one as far as the offense goes. But you got to be excited about some of these guys. If one of them were to work into a more prolific role or an injury were to happen, whoever that guy might be that ends up getting working his way into those reps could be really valuable in that, like you guys said, that tight end 2, just because I expect Mo Alley Cox, Jack Doyle, and the 4th-round rookie pick tight end to get some work as well. How they're going to use them, yet to be seen, but I think a lot of the time, 2 of them could be on the field a whole bunch this year.
You all make very sound points, and I like them, but I think I'm about 100% out on Jack Doyle this year. Call it the recency bias that we talk about all the time, but I had Jack Doyle in enough leagues last year and got burned by that one that, we all know that I typically don't take tight end and anywhere, in a single digit round. So it's normally a 11th, 12th, 13th round type of deal. And he's a guy that when it gets down there, if it's Jack Doyle or, option B, I'm probably taking option B on that one. Just from the standpoint, I don't know that I'm that big a fan on what that's going to look like from the tight end room this year in Indy. So I'm out on that one, but you guys make very valid points, and he very well could have some big fantasy relevancy there. Any desire to talk about any of the other two tight ends that we've mentioned there? They're Mo Alley Cox, or the fourth rounder they just drafted. No, all right. Let's go ahead and move on over to the quarterback room. They got a new one over there. I think Alex is a little excited here. This is his favorite player ever to talk about. I'm going to say ever. I'm going to go that bold on that one. Carson Wentz coming over from the Eagles, finishes quarterback 22 last year, 251 completions, 437 attempts, 2,620 yards, 6 passing touchdowns, 15 INTs, and he rushed for 52 yards for an additional 276 and 5 on the ground. Guys, your thoughts on the Carson Wentz?
So I can't talk about how I think all these wide receivers are going to finish in, wide receiver 2 territory,
really
and
painting yourself in a corner here.
Say something nice about Carson Wentz. So I will say something nice about Carson Wentz. I think he's in line for 28 touchdowns. I'm going to call it 11 interceptions, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 41 to 4,200 yards passing. I do think this Indianapolis team is going to be very balanced. They're going to be able to lean on the run, but they will find a lot of efficiency out of the passing game because of all the things that we've talked about earlier. So for that reason, I think Carson Wentz finishes somewhere QB 11, QB 12. Like, I don't think he's running enough anymore to get inside, the top 8. But I do think that he is in QB1 territory. I think that offense that is around Carson Wentz is the most talented that he's played with in his career. I think that the defense that he has on the other side of him is a very, very good defense. I don't know if it's the best one, because a couple of those Eagles teams that he played on early in the season had really good defenses also, but that only benefits him, right? It means that he doesn't have to push. He doesn't have to worry about not getting the ball back. He doesn't always have to make that knee-jerk reaction. It's okay to throw the ball away and live to fight another down. And I think all this will benefit. On top of Frank Reich is his head coach, and that's where the two have had the most success with each other. So put it all together. Carson Wentz, I have him, quarterback 11, quarterback 12. He's coming off the board right now at about quarterback 15 or quarterback 16. So there's a bit of a value there, which is always a good thing when you're drafting any position. So all signs are pointing towards I am going to favor Carson Wentz this year.
Yeah, I'm also very high on Carson Wentz, not just being a Colts fan. I just like to reunite him with Frank Reich when he played his best football. And there's something to the fact of getting out of Philadelphia to Indianapolis, to a small market. And this team is really set up for success now. He was really kind of just the missing piece. But like I said, my QB8, right behind Justin Herbert and Lamar Jackson. Maybe not quite the running threat he used to be, but he could still have a red zone rushing touchdown or two. But I love the situation for Wentz, the offensive line, the running game, the tight end depth, the Frank Reich connection, and most of all, the defense. Any mistakes that he may make early in the year as the growing pains happen in this offense, that defense is going to get the ball back, going to kind of mitigate the damage and kind of be able to help Carson Wentz keep his head on a little bit and not get discouraged a little quick, because I think that's what we saw. 87 sacks in the last 2 years. This is a guy that's been beat down and just, really wasn't in his right mind playing quarterback when he's so focused on not getting hit, not getting knocked down, and trying to stay healthy, coming off some pretty good injuries. But and honestly, with JTT in this running game and the emphasis they're going to put on it, he doesn't have to carry the load like he had to do in Philadelphia. Even the time missed, he still had 4 come from behind wins the year before, 2 last year in limited action. So a lot of times where it was really kind of bad situational football, and Carson Wentz put in bad situations where this pass rush gets the tee off on him. And I really think, football just wasn't fun in Philadelphia anymore. But Phillip Rivers was 10th in yards last year, just under 4,200 yards. No reason to think that Carson Wentz couldn't match that or even do a little bit better. So I'm seeing him somewhere in that 43 to 4,500 yard range, 32 to 35 yards passing. And I agree with you guys, kind of that 10 to 12 interception range. I don't think he'll get all the way back down to 7 because he's going to be shooting to some guys deep down the field trying to make some big plays, and sometimes those are going to get picked off a little more than Philadelphia. A lot of underneath stuff. The tight ends, a lot safer throws. I think they're going to ask him to do things a little bit different in Indy just with the personnel, but I think ultimately it bodes well. A lot of deep shots, a la Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee. I don't see why the Colts won't kind of mirror that kind of thing going on with the emphasis on that run game and the play action passing.
My analysis of Carson Wentz cannot be taken seriously, so I'll pass.
Oh, come on, Alex. This is the one all off season. When we get to whatever team,
you get to brag on him.
Yes.
No, I
mean,
know. Okay, so
he plays Houston and Jacksonville each
I
twice.
know.
Like, if for nothing else,
hey, hold on. He also got to play. He also got to play Washington and the Giants and the Cowboys. So it's not, it wasn't like he was coming out of
a juggernaut. Yeah,
last year. I mean, he got to play, that was the division that nobody wanted to win last year. So, yeah, I mean, obviously for my personal, just to take my fandom hat, which there's a really, weird experience being a fan of somebody that's 8-9 years my junior. It's just a different conversation for a different day, but it is. I will obviously overspend for Carson Wentz because I have been a fan. I mean, I've been tracking the guy since he was a senior in college, right? I got to see him. I was at his pro day. I got to watch him go through the draft process by 1 degree of separation, essentially. And so I have always had a soft spot for Carson Wentz. And he was a guy that when I picked him up, it was one of those weird things where, like, I usually spend the last pick in our home league draft. I'll spend it on a guy that I either know personally or I watched or I have some personal connection to some one way or another. And so I picked him up with the last pick of the draft. And then, Teddy Bridgewater's knee explodes. Sam Bradford gets shipped out of town to Minnesota. And all of a sudden, Carson Wentz is starting his rookie year, even though he wasn't supposed to. I mean, if you guys remember that, Carson was supposed to sit behind Sam Bradford. And through a series of events, he didn't sit. And he played right away. And so I've been a huge fan of his career, of him. And I think him getting out of Philadelphia is the best thing that will happen to his career because it was going nowhere. After the lightning in a bottle that they caught when they won the Super Bowl, the front office decisions in Philadelphia were head scratchers at best. They tried to invest in an O-line, but they couldn't keep an O-line healthy. They tried to bring in weapons, but they couldn't keep those weapons healthy. There were weeks in 2019, I believe, and maybe even in 2020, where they were literally signing dudes off the street that were playing on Sunday. They were signing them on a Tuesday, they were playing on Sunday. Carson Wentz was meeting these guys for the first time, having to try and figure out, and they still made the playoffs. They still were able to. And it was because of Carson Wentz. Now, I know that there is the narrative out there about Carson Wentz and his inability to lead the team, but let's not forget that the Eagles did him no favors when they could have drafted him help, and they made the investment of him to be the franchise quarterback. They gave him the big contract. Then what did they turn around and do? Draft a quarterback in the second round. I think Aaron Rodgers is a little upset that Carson Wentz was able to get out of that bad situation, and Aaron Rodgers hasn't been able to do it yet. So I think this situation is good. I know that he has a great personal connection to Frank Reich. I actually got a chance to talk to Frank Reich 2 days before the Super Bowl. when nobody else was talking to Frank Reich. And I got the opportunity to ask him about Carson. And it was a conversation that I will forever remember, because he had such good things to say. And nobody was really on to what Frank Reich was doing, because Doug Peterson was the play caller at the time. So when you're just an OC kind of in name only, nobody really pays attention to you. But as it turns out, Frank Reich's very smart. And I said it earlier, he might be one of the most underrated offensive minds in the league right now, because he was able to take a Phillip Rivers. I mean, it was a plug and play last year. Take a Phillip Rivers led offense with no offseason to the playoffs. And I know that Phillip Rivers is good, but it takes a team. It's not just one guy. So I think Carson Wentz has a better year this year. Kevin, you're at 28 touchdowns. I was leaning more towards the 30, 31 touchdown area for Carson. I don't know that he gets up to 35, maybe with the extra game. That's where I was going with the 30-31 with the extra game. I'm still in the 10 to 12 interception range. I don't think we're going to see him turn the ball over as much, because he has protection. He has weapons to throw to. He has a running game that's reliable, and not whenever Miles Sanders decides to rip off a 70-yard run. Otherwise, he's running for 2 yards each attempt or less. And so this is only going to help Carson Wentz and his stock. And for all of the people that are down on him, I hope I'm in leagues with you, because I can get him on the cheap. I don't have to overspend for him like I've been doing the last 4 or 5 years. And I can actually get him at the value that he should be, instead of the value that I have for him.
Yeah, I love it. Alex and I are actually co-managing a team that Billy and Kevin are in, and
I picked right in front of Billy, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we were right in there, and it was funny because Alex and I are looking at it, and it's a super flex. We've already got Dak on the roster. We know that we're going to have to pick up a second quarterback, and the fact that I'm co-managing with Alex, I know that second quarterback is going to be Carson Wentz. So it's one of those that we've got to temper and judge on where we think we're going to have to take him. And we kind of got down there into the very tail end of the 5th round. We were sitting on the turn at the 5th, and Alex and I remember that we're having the conversation back and forth. We're like, we need the quarterback. And Alex is like, I need my dude. And I'm like, well, all right, let's do it. Like,
pull the trigger, man. Let's pull the trigger.
Let's go. Because I do see a big bounce back coming for him, and I think that this is going to be the year that you see this thing turned around.
It can't be as bad as last year, right? It just can't be as bad. There's no way.
Carson Wentz got sacked 50 times in Philadelphia, his last season on the field. And Phillip Rivers, a guy that took a lot of sacks in San Diego and in LA, up in the 30 range almost every year, only 19 sacks last year. Now, taking into consideration, Phillip Rivers can't move. Carson Wentz is an athlete. So I don't see Carson Wentz getting sacked much at all, mostly because there's going to be a lot of guys blocking. The ball's going to come out quick. And I think as Carson Wentz gets going, one thing you don't want is a hot Carson Wentz. And I think he's got the guys around him to get hot. If Carson Wentz gets hot, we might be MVP conversation with a guy like Carson Wentz. He has that kind of talent. And in this offense, and the way it's going to be built, I think things are going to be really, really easy on him to look really, really smooth.
This is a show of bold takes, apparently.
Well, that's not all that bold of a take. He was in the MVP conversation before his knee gave out in 2017, right? Like he was
before
cut, right?
Patrick Mahomes entered the NFL.
I agree. It's gonna be tough to unseat the reigning champ, but that it's not impossible. It's plausible. It very much is plausible.
If the Colts go 12-4, 13-3, Carson Wentz, his name's going to get thrown around a little bit.
Throw one more number on each of those sides. Don't forget, we're 17 now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. No, you're right. But it was funny. I bring up that draft that we were talking about simply from the standpoint that it was one of those. Alex and I thought that we might have been reaching there a little bit when we were doing it, and we knew that we were kind of going to it, but we wanted to get the Carson and get that experience there because we saw a bounce back coming. And it was amazing because literally almost the second that we hit the draft button and we saw Carson's name pop up off the board, you had about four other guys that, I was taking him this round kind of thing. And it's like, well, maybe maybe we didn't reach on that one near as much as we thought. And as these things start kind of drawing in and we start seeing, some of these things play through, and drop the Mike FF, who's also in that league, said it was a little bit of a reach, but not too bad. But it's just interesting to see how some of that has changed because, going into last year in all of these things, Carson Wentz taking him, I think he was the 11th or 12th quarterback. I was counting it up in that one. Would have been a reach going into last year. And now it's one of those that people were a little upset that he didn't fall just a little bit further there to him, and that they would have spent up even more so on that to get him on his roster because of everything that you guys just said there. And to kind of bring that point home, I think you do see a bounce back. I'm going to go a little bit more so than not quite as bold as Billy, saying that he might have an MVP type of year, but I could very easily see him finishing probably quarterback 8-9 when it's all said and done this year. I've seen him over 4,000 yards, probably up there around 33 touchdowns, somewhere kind of in that neighborhood there. Just doesn't have the rushing upside, like Kevin mentioned, to get up there inside top 8.
I will say a word of caution though, because this is the way that Carson, even going back to college, but the way when he has been most successful, when the team has been most successful, he hasn't thrown the football a ton. They run the football effectively. He throws it efficiently, but he doesn't throw it a ton. So that is the word of caution that I would put out there, because I think that is it could be realistic that they maybe only throw the football 25 times a game because they want to focus. They want to focus on that run game. And now, while he may throw it 25 times a game or maybe even 30 times a game, he's only going to have 22, 23 completions. But that's very efficient throwing, but it's not a ton of volume. So we just have to see how things start to play out. But I still think even if it is a limited number, it's still going to be efficient enough that it will rack up stats, yards, points, what have you.
Yeah, I agree. I was definitely kind of pissed when you guys took Carson Wentz there, and here's why. So Tom Blasco is on the opposite side of me, and I knew that that Wentz wasn't gonna make it by Tom 2 more rounds and get back to me. So I thought I was being sneaky, queuing up Carson Wentz in that 5th round. When you guys took him, I about shit myself. I could not believe. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, because I was trying to make Tom, come unglued and start blowing my phone up, and you guys pulled the trigger on him anyway. So just kind of shows, the potential's there. And as we start diving a little bit deeper into this, Carson Wentz is pretty attractive in that spot.
I don't think it was for that pick. I think it was for the Kellen Mond pick. But Pinto sent the best GIF I've ever seen.
Yep.
I have I've never seen it before, but it is a panda slapping the table. It is the funniest GIF I've ever seen.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Great.
And then JB Cho say that Wentz plays lights out every other year. This year is an on year. Kind of relating that back to a Matt Ryan type of deer. A good year, bad, right? Good year, bad year, good year, bad year type of thing, or good year, not so good year in some cases. But no, absolutely, guys. Any other thoughts on these Indianapolis Colts for 2021? All righty. Well, any final thoughts for the listeners?
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. This was a great time hanging out.
Absolutely. Billy, if you want to make sure to tag your socials and tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, at BWitt24 on Twitter. Hit me up. That's about the only place I'm at. Getting into sports me a little bit here and there. I need to get more active on there. But, yeah, find me on Twitter. Let's talk football, talk St. Jude Bowl, and let's get you in.
And that is BWitt24 with 2 T's. I made that mistake earlier today. My apologies, Billy, but I've corrected that in the comments on that. No Kevin, worries. Alex, any final thoughts for the listeners?
No, we're inching closer. We're in the dog days of summer as we get ready for training camp. OTAs have pretty much all finished up here now. So no news is good news. as players do the right thing and remain professionals on and off the field and can maintain their validity on our fantasy rosters for those of us who have nothing better to do and draft far too early before the beginning of the season.
I hope the next time we speak, the Broncos have a new quarterback that has
buddy. Tomorrow.
I hope. I am tempering expectations, as I said.
I just hope I get to wake up and that's the first thing that I wake up to. That would be
how
amazing.
Glorious would that be?
And Mike, it's not blasphemy.
Come on now.
Mike,
you can't say that you wouldn't enjoy watching Rodgers and Mahomes go against each other twice a season. Like, that's just great football.
With all that talent, oh my God, Denver, that would be such a fun offense.
Cortland Sutton.
Jesus.
And then JB Cho saying that Drew Lock season, guys, come on. No, we saw that.
We're fine with
we're out.
We don't need to see it again.
So, hey, do you guys call into work tomorrow if A-Rod becomes a Bronco overnight here?
Maybe.
I can't.
No, with all the problems I have going on at work right now, I can't afford to.
Oh boy!
I had to cut my vacation a day short because I had so many problems I had to start fixing. I can't afford to call in.
But there will be a few celebratory beverages, I'm sure.
Yes.
Oh, hell yes.
Yes, very much so. So, guys, I very much I think that's going to do it for us. But, Billy, we very much appreciate you coming on and taking the time. We know it's a little bit late there, but, you're welcome anytime. And it's always a pleasure to talk football with you. Guys, if you haven't done so already, get over there, give them a follow. BWhitt24, that's BWHITT24. Don't forget the 2 T's like I did earlier. But give them a follow. Great follow over there. They've got some amazing things going on with the Fantasy First Rounders live in the St. Jude's Bowl. If you haven't done that, get there, sign up. It's a lot of fun. Like we already said earlier, the boys are playing in that thing, and so give it a shot. See what you can do. See if you can best either Billy, any of the other fantasy first rounders, or the good old boys playing in that thing. One of the big events we look forward to every year. But guys, I do believe that that's going to wrap up yet another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Make sure you're hitting us up on our socials. We got the Twitter, the Instagram, the Facebook, the Twitch at Good Old Boys FF. We've got the website for you, goodoldboysff.com, the YouTube channel, the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast YouTube channel. Make sure that you click the subscribe button there. For Kevin and Alex, I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe.